It finally happened. Jayber is finally a good character. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over Jayber. Jayber got a bunch of buffs with the launch of season 3, and they kind of like redid his kit. He's actually so strong now. It's pretty awesome. He has become my most catalyzed descendant, even over my Serena, if that tells you anything. And I absolutely love his playstyle. It's so just interesting to run around and throw the turrets down. He is so much fun. He can do everything in the game, including Stormhanger, in a very impressive time, I might add. So we're gonna go over 2 different builds today. We have his mobbing build that I use for just general play. This is perfect for Axion Planes, Purge 10s, 400s, you name it, he can do it. And then we're gonna also show you my Stormhanger build, where I managed to get a 1 and 12-second clear. That's the best I have so far, but I am still trying to beat my record. And I know it's not a world record or anything, but it is still pretty cool to be able to actually do that with a character that a couple of weeks ago was the worst character in the game. And now he is doing clear times very quickly on the brand new Abyss boss. He can handle Axion Planes like no other. His whole entire kit is really cool, and I'm super excited to show you guys these builds. Now, before I do jump into the builds, if you guys are just looking for screenshots, you can go ahead and jump to this timestamp right here. It'll take you to all the graphics for all the builds. There's going to be 2 different builds on those graphics, so just kind of pay attention to what ones you're looking at, because they're very specific to what they do. But let's jump into the builds, let's check them out, and let's see kind of how he plays and what he's all about. Okay, so let me just go over his abilities really quick so you kind of know how he plays, because no one really played Jayber up until this point, since he was like the worst character in the game, but he kind of had a really big glow up, and now he's like pretty good. We're going to show you kind of how he plays. Basically, they've reworked it to where a couple of his Transcendent mods are kind of merged into his kit now. And then he also gained a 3rd turret, and those turrets can actually be just like placed by 1 button click rather than 2. I know that kind of sounds dumb, but it definitely helped his kit. His play style works really nice. So you wanted to throw your turrets down. You're going to throw 3 of those down, 1, 2, and 3. And then you're going to activate your 4th ability, blow those turrets up. The pulling in this part is going to be a part of the build, but this doesn't normally leave this like electric AoE on the ground. And the fact that they got towed has something to do with the build as well. So I just wanted to give you a brief little rundown. 3 turrets, then you activate his 4th. But let's jump into his mods and let's check out how I'm doing that. Okay, so for the mods themselves, starting off with the Transcendent mod, we're using immediate purge code. So what this does is whenever you use this skill, it changes your 4th ability. Whenever you use it, it instantly explodes all of the turrets that you have out on the battlefield and inflicts damage like in their radius. It does like this cool like lightning storm effect. And then it leaves these like explosive puddles on the ground that are just kind of all this like lightning energy. They deal damage over time, and it's really good just area coverage. Just in total, you can cover huge parts of the map with this. After you activate your 4th ability, it gives you a buff called Overhaul. And what Overhaul does is it lasts for 30 seconds, and it gives you a 25% increase to your movement speed. As well as, while you have Overhaul kind of active, every turret you place will become the enhanced version of that turret automatically. Now, the reason this is so good is because they just deal more damage, they become a bigger radius, and just overall in general, they're just better turrets. Then from here, we're going to just keep spamming our turrets until we get our actual 4th ability back on cooldown, and then we can utilize it and just rinse and repeat that. So typically it's about 3 turrets being placed, then you activate your 4th ability, turn that into another 3 turrets placed into your 4th ability, so on and so forth. And if your 4th ability is not ready to be used, you can just throw a 4th turret down. And there's a reason I'm kind of talking about 4s, and we'll get into that whenever we get to the actual like trigger module and whatnot, but just know that you want to kind of play his skills in 4s. Now, in order to do that, we're going to need as much cooldown as we can possibly get. So we're going to be throwing Nimble Fingers and MP Conversion on this build, as well as Focus on Dimension, just for all of the skill cooldown that we need, as well as an increase to our Dimension skill power modifier. Our turrets deal Dimension damage, so we want to be buffing this up as much as absolutely possible to make sure that our turrets can kind of just work for us, rather than we have to like constantly keep them up and also shoot things. So definitely want to be focusing on Dimension with Focus on Dimension. The other damage bucket stuff we're going to be kind of playing into is going to be power increase for just a massive bump to our skill power, non-attribute amplification just to give us a bump to our non-attribute skill power, and dimension amplification for the increase to our dimension skill power modifier. So then with all of these kind of built into place, the actual game will register its math, go through the damage buckets and see, okay, you want your turrets to deal a lot of damage? Okay, sounds good. We'll do that for you. So definitely want to play into all different damage buckets to make your whole build just stronger in general. And then we kind of have some quality of life stuff. We want to make our turrets hit a bigger radius, as well as our kind of like electric puddles, I'm going to call them, also deal damage in a bigger radius. So we're going to throw skill expansion on here just for that flat 92 increase to our range. Then we want to focus on our HP because our turrets have the same HP as ourself. So we're going to throw on increased HP just for, you know, the 218% increase to our max HP. And then we're going to want to focus on how to recover all of the MP that we're going to be using when we spam the turrets. So I personally went with selective recovery MP. This has been the most consistent way for me to get all of my MP recovery. I did try MP collector, but it actually doesn't work with your turrets. Basically, you have to get the kills yourself. The turret's kills don't count, so you won't actually be gaining any sort of benefit from MP Collector, and instead you're going to have to actually like fight your turrets in order to get the kills. And so it just wasn't super consistent. I want to be able to just have my turrets do all the work, and I just kind of run around and stay alive. And while I'm running around, I can also pick up little MP bricks. So selective recovery MP just was the most consistent for me. And so I definitely recommend that for sure. And then to round everything off and to make it all work perfectly smooth, we're going to be using multi-talented. Now, multi-talented so good here because our turret spam is dimension-based skill, and we are constantly throwing down turrets. Therefore, we are constantly getting the actual effect from using a dimension skill, which is an additional 20.5% cooldown on our skills. So just all around, this mod rounds out everything, makes everything flow perfectly, and just get that fourth ability on cooldown extremely fast. So for the trigger module, we're going to be using Power Beyond, which is kind of a given. This has become the best trigger module in the game, especially for skill-based Descendants, because just equipping this thing gives you an increase to your skill power. I was fortunate enough to get the God roll, the 2 out of 2 the other day from the Wall Crasher fight. I got the maxed out of both stats at 15% increase to my skill power, as well as the skill effect range at the bottom increasing by 20%. So I was extremely excited when this dropped. But basically what this does for the build is whenever you activate your first or your fourth ability, you're going to be gaining a stack of void recharge. And basically when this gets to 4 stacks, it will create a toad effect. Now, this is extremely good because it will pull all enemies in the area into the center point, and then the turrets will blow up and deal that damage. So that was the reason why I said you want to play in 4s, because this has 4 stacks. You want to go turret, 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 then your fourth ability, causing the toe effect to occur, pulling everything in the radius into the center, and then blowing up because the fourth ability is making your turrets blow up. So it just works really well. The way that this plays is just really unique. It almost feels like this was made for Jayber, and kind of why I think they gave him a 3rd turret, just so it mathematically plays out correctly and actually like works really well. As for the Stormhanger build, this one is slightly different. It's actually the opposite of our mobbing build. Basically, we don't really want to focus on cooldown, and instead we want to focus on just a raw amount of power. We want a ton of skill power, we want a ton of modifiers, we want a ton of non-attribute, a ton of defense, just a bunch of stuff here. You also really want to focus on HP, basically making it to where when we summon those turrets, they are going to be as powerful and as strong as they can possibly be and have the most survivability. Let's kick things off with the HP mod, since we want to make sure that our turrets are healthy. We're going to be using increased HP as well as stim accelerant just to give us a huge bump to our max HP. This just makes sure that the turrets actually have good health and they actually survive. The next thing we're going to focus on is skill range, just to make sure that our turrets have the most range that they possibly can. So we're going to throw on skill expansion just to give us a 92% increase to our range. And then we're going to also throw on iron defense here. Now, iron defense is kind of cool because it starts to play into our skill power modifiers. And this is giving us a really big bump to our defense as well. So just more survivability all around, but also the skill power modifier that you get from this is actually really helpful. And you can use spear and shield here, but from just my testing, I was just getting more consistent clears on Stormhanger with iron defense versus spear and shield. Spear and Shield does basically the same thing, except it's going to increase your skill power rather than be a skill power modifier. So I play with one of these two. Definitely pick one of these and then put it on just for the defense and the additional skill power benefits. But I just personally have had more success with Iron Defense, so I went with that. Next up, we're going to be throwing on Maximize Power and Maximize Skill. Now, Maximize Power is giving us a skill power modifier of 96%, and we do get some additional skill cooldown here, but this is the opposite of what we want. Skill cooldown in the plus means that it's going to take our skills longer to cooldown, so that is actually a negative or a debuff, but like I said, skill cooldown does not matter. And then Maximize Skill is going to give us 87% of our additional skill power. So we're getting both skill power and skill power modifier from both of these. So just all around, just super, super good to make sure that we have a lot of skill power and a lot of that modifier. So our damage buckets start to calculate the game's damage and actually deal a lot of damage with those turrets. Then we want to bump up those other damage buckets. We want to kind of dip into the dimension bucket as well as the non-attribute bucket so that we just get a good broad damage spectrum. For that reason, we're going to be using dimension amplification and non-attribute amplification. Both of these giving us either a huge increase to their respective modifiers. And we do lose a lot of skill critical hit rate, and skill critical hit damage, but we're not critting with this build by any means whatsoever, so the negatives are not even relevant here. And then to give us just a little bit more non-attribute, we're going to be throwing on non-attribute Succinctum. What this does is gives us a little bit of that non-attribute skill power modifier and the critical hit resistance, just for more survivability and all around just helping out that bucket, since we want to kind of focus on non-attribute for not only our turrets, but also our fourth ability. And then, of course, to round everything out, we're using Preemptive Strike. Now, Preemptive Strike is one of those ones that not a lot of people really use, and this seems to be the most optimal kind of spot to use this. Basically, what it says is when landing a skill attack on enemies with max HP, deals 17% of the skill damage dealt as additional damage to the target. So this is going to be giving our turrets a buff of 17% damage on Stormhanger for pretty much like half the fight. This will only work on his shield since his max HP is always going to be maxed out while we're attacking his shield. But once we actually take his shield out and start attacking his health, this falls off. Now, there is a couple of other things you could potentially use here, such as Dangerous Ambush, but Dangerous Ambush doesn't super work a lot of the time, if not at all. It still kind of requires some testing and seeing kind of how the turrets interact. But I have just found to be the most successful with Preemptive Strike, and a lot of other content creators are as well. This just kind of seems to be the go-to in this actual slot. And then the trigger module, we're going to be running the same trigger module as before, Power Beyond, just to give us that skill power, just kind of the additional skill power just by equipping this. Just to make our turrets deal more damage. So that's pretty obvious. We're not really using it for anything else other than just the free skill power increase. All right, guys, here is the full mobbing setup. Like I said, this is just one of the most fun characters I have played recently. I've been playing him a ton, and I just absolutely fell in love with his play style. So there's that. And then here is the Stormhanger build. Again, no Transcendent mod on this one, because the two that we do have access to don't really do anything for the actual fight. And we want to make sure that that third ability can just kind of be held and then just kind of shot when needed to re-up the enhancement on your turrets. No real reason to use a Transcendent mod here, since the two that we have access to don't really do anything for you. So, but super, super easy build. The fight is really interesting, a nice little cool mechanic to it, that you have to kind of flow around your turrets and keep them alive and stuff. So super enjoy both of these builds, but let's go jump over into all of his actual equipment and weapons and whatnot and kind of round out all of these builds. As for the weapons, I am only using the Peacemaker. You can throw on some other stuff, whatever you want, honestly. But the Peacemaker is the main actual weapon that you want to be using. Basically, the whole concept of the gun itself is its unique ability. So let me hide my camera real quick. So when using a dimension skill, which is going to be our turrets, basically, you gain stacks of single reload for peace. When you are at max stacks, you will be gaining additional non-attribute skill power by like a whole big margin. So you're just using this thing strictly for a stat stick. You're not using this by any other means. You're not shooting the gun. You're not using it for any sort of damage. You are just physically using it to gain that additional non-attribute skill power. And then for the cores, the only thing that matters on this thing is the grappling hook charge time and 2 sprint speed cores. You don't need anything else. You can literally roll this with whatever you want. Just make sure you have 1 grappling hook charge and 2 sprint speed cores, and you're good to go. You're using this as a stat stick to boost your skills, and you're using this as a movement tech or a movement speed weapon to just constantly be running around the arena or even around the battlefield. Wherever you're going to be playing this, just hold this in your hand and run around and you should be good to go. As for the reactor for the mobbing setup, we're going to be using a non-attribute and dimension reactor. We're going to be matching the mounting with our hand cannon because we're using the Peacemaker. And then I went with dimension skill power boost ratio as well as skill cooldown just to have extra cooldown on the turrets, and then the turret's actual like damage type is dimension. So kind of boosting up the turrets here on that one. As for the other stuff, you could potentially go with something like this, like a non-attribute and dimension, or for the colossal setup or like against like Stormhanger and stuff, you can go for something with additional skill damage when attacking Colossus. This one I got to roll with skill cost, not the best. So I was looking for additional skill damage to Colossi as well as like dimension or non-attribute. So I'd use one of those for the actual Stormhanger fight. And then just for general mobbing, you could use something like I have equipped or something like this that's giving us 2 different power boost ratios. For the external components on both of the builds, we're going to be using the Enlightened Mage set. You want to make sure that you have max HP and defense cores all the way down. And then your typical stuff here, you know, your recovery outside of combat, inside of combat, max HP, max MP, MP recovery, defense, max shield, shield recovery. Basically just focus on all of the MP ones. And then this is kind of nice too, because shield recovery and max shield just gives me a little bit of extra survivability. So, but definitely want the 4-piece Enlightened Mage set for the additional non-attribute skill damage while you're using non-attribute skills. Basically just it makes the entire build work. It makes all of your stuff stronger. For the Arche tuning, this is going to be for the mobbing setup. They're very, very similar boards though. They don't change super much. But for the mobbing setup, we're getting going up to the top right for skills. So, you know, your skill cooldowns and whatnot. We're going to be picking up enhanced skill power as well as enhanced skill cooldown. And then up here up top, we're going to be using final preparations. Basically, we're not using non-attribute cohesion because it doesn't work with the actual turrets. That would be obviously better because we'd be getting more of a damage buff, but it doesn't work with the turrets. It doesn't actually, they don't actually like proc it. So this one's decent because we are going to be attacking with our 4th skill. And this just gives us, one, a bunch of skill power, but also a bunch of effective range, which is kind of nice. Makes the turrets just a little bigger. So we're going to be using that on both builds because the non-attribute cohesion does not work. And then the only differences between the mobbing and the bossing, we kind of take a little bit different of a direction. We're still going to be getting to the same like orange or the same gold ones. And again, final preparations. But we're going to be going more into like right here for extra Colossus damage. Right here for extra range, a little bit of more health to make our turrets have a little bit more health. So they're both very, very similar builds, just kind of catered towards the activity that you're taking the build into. And then for your Arche tuning, there's not a whole lot that can really be used with skill descendants this season. There's a couple of really good ones, but for the most part, like this kind of has just been working for me. We're going to pick up Focus Boost. The reason we're doing Focus Boost as opposed to Arche Circulation Tactic is because we already have enough skill cooldown when Multi-Talented is activated. So this is kind of like irrelevant. It doesn't really help us. So we went for the extra minus in skill costs just to have more MP control. And then selective neurostimulation for that extra MP every 45 seconds, as well as pain suppression to have a little bit more survivability as far as our health is concerned. I use this exact setup for both builds, so there's no real reason to change anything. However, you could potentially take off pain suppression and throw on toxic focused rounds because Stormhanger is like weak to toxic, so you can at least add a little bit of like toxic to your weapons. you wanted to run around with something like Malevolent in that fight, you definitely could. But this has just been kind of working for me. You can kind of mess with this, but this is really good for the most part. As for the fashion, we are going to be using the Thunderbearer. This is the skin that you get from fighting Stormhanger. And I went with a couple of different blues and blacks and a couple of like golds or silvers rather. So we got the real matte black, we got enamel black, the plastic cobalt blue, the shiny metal silver, and Spotify black. So 5 different colors here, kind of spread across the board in a couple of different ways, just to kind of have unique, or the blue be the unique accent. And we're throwing on the sword for a little bit more kind of like style with the blues, and we also have chrome white on this to make the blade shiny. And then I'm using the nobleman hair. I threw on the basic white just because I thought the white looked cool with like all the black. It kind of matches like the silver accent, and then of course like the cool spawn or whatnot. So, but I really thought this fashion looked just really cool. Wow, you actually skipped to the screenshots. Nah, I'm just playing. That's totally cool. I hope you enjoy the screenshots, and if you have any questions, please drop a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. All right, guys, that is my Jayber build, both for mobbing as well as for Stormhanger. If you guys do have any questions, please drop them down in the comments below. I am currently updating both my Glay as well as my Freyna, so just stay tuned for that. We're going to be getting those videos out as soon as possible. Not much has changed, but still wanted to do some updated guides for Season 3. As well as my Eugen build, I kind of am fine-tuning some of that stuff for the actual like wall crasher fights. Where you can play like a support build and actually keep people alive during the fight. So just stay tuned for it. I do have a couple of videos kind of in the works right now. So I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the new rework to Jayber. Have you guys tried it out yet? And if you haven't, I definitely recommend it because he is so much fun. But I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, peace out, guys.